My brother faked a car crash to stop my wedding. My parents believed him and told me, cancel it or be dead to us. I chose love and cut them off. 14 years later, they showed up at my door. But what they saw inside left them completely shattered. My name is Susan Dalton, and I live in Dallas, Texas. I'm 42 years old now, a mother of 3, and a freelance interior designer. But everything I have now, my family, my peace, my home, didn't come easy. It was earned through heartbreak, betrayal, and choices that most people wouldn't believe I had to make. I've told very few people the whole story, but today, I want to share it as it really happened. Back when I was 22, life felt full of promise. I had just landed a contract with my first major design client, and I was preparing to marry the man I loved, Jared Lewis. Jared wasn't just charming and intelligent. He was the kind of man who kept his word, respected my independence, and came from a family that treated me like one of their own. He had just launched a small software company with a couple of college friends, and though it wasn't making much money yet, you could tell it was headed somewhere big. I was proud of him, and even prouder that we were about to start a life together. But there was one person who couldn't be happy for me. My older brother, Zane. He was 2 years older than me, but it always felt like I was the one expected to act like the adult. Zane had bounced between jobs since high school, gym trainer, pizza delivery, retail, but never stuck to anything for long. He always had an excuse. Bad bosses, bad luck, people out to get him. My parents, James and Lillian, were forever making excuses for him too. They treated Zane like he was delicate, special, as if the world owed him something. Me? I was the dependable one, the quiet achiever, the one who didn't need help. That's what they always said. When Jared and I got engaged, my parents smiled politely, but I noticed how Zane's face changed. He said congratulations, but his voice didn't match the words. Over the next few weeks, I started picking up on small things, Zane making comments like, "Wow, must be nice to marry someone with money," or "Some people just get lucky." I brushed it off at first. I thought he was being immature, or maybe just insecure. But I didn't know how far it would go. A week before the wedding, everything turned upside down. I was at a cafe reviewing the final guest list when my mom called, her voice tight and panicked. "Zane's been in an accident," she said. "A bad one. He's in the hospital. You need to come right away." I dropped everything and rushed to the hospital. Jared came with me. When we got there, Zane was lying in bed with a neck brace and a sling, looking miserable. But something felt off. The doctors didn't seem that worried. In fact, they told me he hadn't suffered any fractures, just minor bruises. He'd been released to go home within hours. But Zane kept groaning, acting like he'd barely survived. That evening, I overheard him speaking to my mom when he thought no one else was around. "She's marrying that guy anyway," he said, "like I don't even matter. What kind of sister does that?" My mom replied softly, "Let's give her a little more time. Maybe she'll come to her senses." I couldn't believe it. It wasn't just that Zane had faked or exaggerated his accident. It was that he was using it to guilt-trip our parents, and worse, they were going along with it. That night, I confronted them. "I'm still getting married, Mom. I love Jared." My dad looked at me as if I'd insulted him. "Your brother's not well, Susan. If you walk down that aisle while he's lying in pain, you'll regret it forever." "And if I don't?" I asked. "Then you can stay alone," my mom said, her voice cold and final. "We won't be attending." It felt like the floor had fallen out beneath me. I stared at them, hoping one of them would say something, soften the blow. But they didn't. They just stood there, silent and unbending. I left without another word. That night, I cried harder than I ever had in my life. Not because they weren't coming to the wedding. I had Jared, and his family had already offered to fill in, no questions asked. No, I cried because I realized the truth. My parents had never really seen me. Not for who I was. Not for what I worked for. They had always seen Zane as the one who needed love and protection, even when he didn't deserve it. I married Jared 3 days later in a beautiful ceremony in a small outdoor chapel outside of Fort Worth. His mother helped me get dressed. His father walked me down the aisle. Not once did they make me feel like I was lacking anything. If anything, I felt more supported and loved than I ever had at home. After the wedding, Jared and I decided to move into a small rental house while his company grew. Over the next few years, we built a quiet, stable life together. We didn't speak to my parents or Zane again. Not out of spite, but out of peace. We never gave them our address, and they never reached out. Or so we thought. 14 years passed. Jared's company grew into something bigger than we had dreamed of. I opened my own interior design studio. We bought a home on the edge of town, a bright, spacious place with a backyard where our kids could play. We had 3 children by then, 2 girls and a boy, and our days were full of laughter, homework, dinners on the porch. It was the kind of life you dream of when you're young, but rarely believe you'll actually get. Then one rainy afternoon it happened. There was a knock at the door. Not the quick kind, slow, heavy, insistent. I looked through the peephole and froze. Standing there, soaked from the rain but somehow defiant, were the last people I ever expected to see again.
Zane.
My mother, my father, and none of them looked like they were here to apologize. I didn't open the door right away. I stood behind it, my heart thudding so hard I could hear it in my ears. 14 years. 14 years of silence, and suddenly, they were here like we'd just seen each other last week. My fingers hovered over the lock before I finally turned it and slowly opened the door. They were soaked through, water dripping from their coats onto my porch. But none of them looked embarrassed or even uncomfortable. Zane had that same smug look I remembered, like he'd walked in on his own terms. "Hi, Susan," my mother said, as if nothing had happened. "We need to talk." I stared at them, not moving. "You found my house," I said, my voice flat. My father stepped forward. "We didn't come to fight. We just need something from you." I didn't invite them in. I should have closed the door, I know that now. But my children were upstairs, and Jared was in the kitchen. I didn't want a scene. I stepped aside and let them in, knowing full well they didn't deserve it. They walked in, looking around at the pictures on the walls, the warm light in the hallway, the smell of baked cookies in the air. My life was nothing like the storm they had brought to the door. Zane's eyes scanned everything slowly. The furniture, the fireplace, the family photos, especially the ones with Jared. He narrowed his eyes like it was all too much to take in. "You've done well for yourself," he muttered, not sounding impressed, more like bitter. "I worked hard for this," I replied. "No one handed it to me." My mother sat down without asking. "We're not here to argue," she said. "But Zane, he's in trouble." I almost laughed, but I held it in. Of course he was. "He lost his job a few months ago," my father added. "And it's been hard." "Hard," I repeated. "You mean like having your family abandon you before your wedding hard?" Zane's expression didn't change. "That wasn't my fault. I was hurt." "No, you pretended to be hurt," I snapped. "Don't rewrite the past now." He leaned forward, placing his hands on his knees. "Look, I'm not here to fight either. But you have everything, and I have nothing." I crossed my arms. "That's not my fault." Then came the part one never could have predicted. "I've loved Jared from the beginning," Zane said, with a strange calmness in his voice. Not in some weird way, just, I admired him. I felt like he had everything I ever wanted. I didn't respond. I wasn't sure what to say. "You had your time with him, Susan," my mother suddenly added. "You've built your life. You're secure. But Zane is struggling. Maybe it's time you thought about him, too." I blinked, sure I'd misheard. "What are you saying?" My father cleared his throat. "We want you to give Jared to Zane. Let him be with someone who needs him now." The room went still. Even after all they'd done, skipping my wedding, cutting me off, never apologizing, I didn't expect this. This wasn't just ridiculous. It was insane. "You want me to give away my husband?" I said slowly, making sure I'd understood them. "You want me to what? Divorce him and hand him over?" Zane nodded. "I think it's fair." I looked at them like strangers. These were my parents? This man was my brother? "You've got to be kidding me," I said under my breath. That's when Jared walked in. He'd been standing in the hallway, listening quietly. Everything okay? He asked me, his eyes flicking to my family.
Not really, I said.
Zane stood up and looked directly at Jared. You know we were meant to be friends, right? Maybe more than that. You always looked out for Susan, but what if I was the one who needed you more? Jared looked at me, then back at Zane. You want to live my life? Zane didn't answer. Jared turned to my parents. You really support this? He's your brother-in-law, my mom said. Isn't family supposed to help each other? That's when Jared smiled slightly. That crooked, amused smile he gets when someone says something completely out of touch. He looked at me and nodded once. I understood immediately. We were going to play along. Jared turned to Zane. You know what? Maybe you're right. Let's give this a shot. Zane's face lit up with hope. Really? Sure, Jared said. I'll quit my job. I'll move in with you. I'll be with you 24 hours a day. We'll eat together, sleep in the same room, go to the gym together if you ever go again. I'll follow you to the bathroom just to be close. That okay? Zane started blinking fast. Wait, what? You want me in your life, right? Jared said, stepping closer. I'll make you breakfast every morning. You like eggs? I'll make them runny. I'll stay home with you all day since you're not working. We'll talk, cuddle on the couch, maybe brush each other's hair. Jared. Zane backed up a step. We don't need money, right? I added. No income? That's fine. I'll divorce him. And I'll take half of everything. Since we don't need anything, I'm sure you and Mom can cover the alimony. The room fell silent. My parents looked unsure for the first time since walking in. Maybe this isn't what we meant, my father said. Zane's face twisted. You're mocking me? Jared looked at him with a calm expression. You asked for something impossible. I just showed you what it would actually look like. Then Zane's voice turned cold. You tricked me. I stepped forward and looked him in the eye.
No, Zane.
You tricked yourself. And you've been doing it your whole life. That was when I knew we were done playing. The fantasy they had walked in with, the fantasy where I'd just roll over and give up the life I built, was shattered. And I wasn't going to let them rewrite the past or steal from my future. Not again. And I wasn't done yet. After everything they had said, after the audacity of their demand, I thought they would leave. I truly believed that the little show Jared and I had put on would be enough to embarrass them, to make them see how absurd and selfish they were being. But I underestimated just how deep their entitlement ran. Zane's pride was bruised, but instead of backing off, he doubled down. His voice trembled with frustration, but his eyes were still burning with that same old resentment. I'm not going to apologize, he said flatly. I've spent my whole life watching you get everything while I was left with nothing. Everything? I asked, stunned. You think I was handed all this? You were always the favorite, he snapped. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because of how opposite that was from the truth. Zane, are you serious? Mom and Dad did everything for you. Do you even remember my wedding? Or were you too busy faking injuries to ruin it? My mother flinched, but stayed quiet. That was her role, silent, enabling, always smoothing things over for Zane. My father, however, still had fight in him. Watch your tone, Susan. We came here respectfully. Respectfully, I repeated. You broke 14 years of silence to tell me to give up my husband like he's furniture. You think that's respect? Jared stood beside me, calm but unshakable. Let's not pretend this visit was ever about reconciliation. This was about control, about power, and you thought you still had it. Zane's voice rose again. He was supposed to be mine. You just took him. He's not a trophy, Zane, I interrupted. He's a person. A person who never wanted anything to do with your drama. Zane's hands curled into fists, and for a moment, I saw the temper he always tried to mask. He'd lost jobs over it, ruined friendships over it, and now here it was again, out in the open, ugly and real. I loved him, Zane muttered, quieter now. Even if you think it's strange, I really did. No, Zane, I said firmly. You loved the idea of being Jared. You loved what he had, what he built. You didn't love him. You envied him. There was no comeback. Just silence. He looked down at the floor like a child caught stealing. That's when the next part happened, the part that made everything final. My youngest daughter, Emily, came down the stairs. She rubbed her eyes and clutched her stuffed animal. "Mommy, who are these people?" she asked. Zane looked up at her, confused and unsure. I stepped forward and gently turned her toward the hallway. "Sweetheart, go back to your room. I'll be there in a minute." But she didn't leave. She looked at Jared, then back at Zane. "Why is that man looking at Daddy so weird?"
Zane's face changed.
I think in that moment, even he realized how unhinged this whole thing had become. He looked down again, ashamed. My mother suddenly stood up. Maybe this was a mistake," she said. I didn't even look at her. "You think?" Jared placed his hand on my back. It was a small gesture, but it grounded me. "I think you all should leave now," he said. My father didn't argue. For once, he looked tired. Tired in the way someone looks when their illusion starts to crack and they're finally forced to face the truth. My mother took Zane's arm and tried to guide him toward the door.
He didn't resist.
But just before they stepped outside, Zane turned back one last time. "You think you've won," he said bitterly. "But you don't know what it's like to be forgotten." "You weren't forgotten," I said. "You were forgiven for far too much." He didn't answer. He just walked out into the rain with them. I stood there, watching the water soak into their jackets, watching them fade into the gray evening light. I closed the door slowly. I didn't slam it. There was no need. That night, I lay in bed with Jared beside me, the room quiet except for the rain tapping against the windows. My mind went back over everything, my childhood, my wedding, the years of silence, the absurdity of the visit. "They haven't changed," I whispered. "No," Jared said. "But you have."
And he was right.
I wasn't that girl anymore. The one begging her parents to understand, crying alone the night before her wedding, wondering what she'd done to deserve being cast aside. I was a mother now.
A wife.
A woman who had built something strong, something stable. And I wasn't going to let anyone tear it down. The next day, I told the kids a softened version of what happened. Just enough to make sense of it. And then life went on. But there was one thing I didn't expect. A week later, we received a letter. No return address, just our names in slanted handwriting. Inside was a short note. It was from my father. "I'm sorry," it read. "We shouldn't have come. But Zane, he's not well. He lost everything after the last company shut down. He's been rejected by every woman he's tried to date. I think, deep down, he thought Jared was the only one who ever treated him like a person. We know we failed both of you in different ways. I don't expect forgiveness. Just please understand." I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. I didn't show it to Jared right away. I wasn't sure I needed to. It didn't change anything. But it told me something important. They came not out of love, but desperation. Not to make peace, but to salvage what they thought they deserved. And the worst part? They still didn't understand what they lost. Time has a way of smoothing over sharp edges, but not all wounds disappear. After that letter, there were no more visits. No more knocks at the door. My parents didn't call. Zane vanished back into whatever mess of a life he'd been living. But something inside me had shifted permanently. I was done holding out hope for change from people who had shown me time and again who they really were. For years past, my children grew taller, louder, more curious about the world. Jared's company expanded to 3 cities, and I opened a small design studio downtown. I hired a few young designers, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was leading something beyond just my home. We had our share of busy seasons, of course, and the usual family stress, but none of it felt heavy. There was always love under it all, real, solid love. The kind that holds when storms come. Then one chilly October morning, a message popped up on my business line. A woman from a matchmaking agency had contacted us asking for confirmation of a reference. Zane Dalton, apparently, had listed me as a family connection for a background check. I stared at my phone for a long time, debating whether to respond. Eventually, I called the agency myself and asked what this was about. The woman explained that Zayn had applied for a premium matchmaking event but was flagged for inappropriate behavior in a previous round. They were following up due to repeated complaints. I thanked her for letting me know and hung up. That night, I told Jared. He shook his head slowly, amused but not surprised. Still trying to cheat his way into someone else's life, he said. I nodded, still pretending nothing's his fault. And that's what stuck with me. After everything, after the stunt at my wedding, after the insane demand to hand over my husband, after years of silence and a pitiful apology that didn't even reach the truth, he was still trying to game the world into giving him what he never earned. That weekend, something unexpected happened. Jared's parents came over for dinner. We hadn't told them about the visit 4 years ago. We didn't want to stir up old emotions, but now it felt safe to talk. Over dessert, I shared everything. The knock on the door, the request, the letter, even the matchmaking nonsense. Jared's mom looked at me quietly for a moment. Then she reached across the table and took my hand. You've built a real family, she said. Don't let their shadows dim your light. You did the right thing. I nodded, but I wasn't sure she knew how much I needed to hear that. My oldest daughter, Claire, who's now 13, has started asking about our extended family. Why don't we see Grandma Lillian or Uncle Zane? She asked one night while brushing her hair. I took a breath. Because not everyone in our family treated us the way family should. Will they ever come back? She asked. I hope not, I said honestly. Sometimes, protecting your peace means keeping distance, even from people who share your blood. She was quiet for a while. Then she said, I'm glad Daddy didn't leave. That hit me right in the chest. Me too, sweetheart, I whispered. Me too. But life, of course, wasn't finished with its surprises. 2 months ago, a letter arrived in the mail, no return address again. I recognized the handwriting. It was from my mother this time. She wrote, Zane has lost everything. He was let go from his last job for inappropriate conduct. He's in debt. We're working 2 part-time jobs just to help him survive. He can't live on his own. We're asking for your help. You're the only one doing well. Please help your brother just a little. We're tired. We're old. You've always been strong. I read the letter twice. Then again. I sat there in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd made lunches for my kids and painted Easter eggs, staring at that piece of paper. There was no apology, no ownership of what they had done. Just another request. Another attempt to guilt me into cleaning up their mess. This time, I didn't cry. I didn't get angry. I didn't even show Jared the letter. I quietly folded it and dropped it into the shredder. I watched the blades tear through the paper until it was gone. And with it, the last thread of guilt I had carried. That night, we had spaghetti. The kids laughed about something silly. My youngest son spilled juice all over his shirt and tried to blame the cat. Jared kissed my temple while I stirred sauce, and I felt it. That weight I'd carried for so long, it was gone. For good. A few days later, while walking with my daughter through our neighborhood, she pointed at a house decorated early for Halloween. Mom, she said, do you think ghosts are real? I smiled. Sometimes, yes. But they don't live under beds or hide in closets. Where then? In our memories, I told her. But we don't have to let them stay forever. She nodded, not fully understanding, but sensing the truth in my words. My story isn't tragic. It's not about revenge or hate. It's about choosing yourself when no one else will. About building a life out of broken pieces and not letting anyone who shattered you back in. Zane might never learn. My parents may never regret what they did. That's not my burden anymore. I am Susan Dalton. I was forgotten, betrayed, manipulated. But I rose. I chose love, peace, truth. And I won't trade that for anyone, no matter how loud their knock.